Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Alyosha Society, where we are pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness through great literature. This, my friends, is the fourth out of 5 total videos in our first poetry unit. So we began with a really long video about different types of poetry, the different rules, the different structures for those different types of poetry, Hebrew poetry, epic poetry, Italian poetry, sonnets, modern poetry. Then we went to Anne Bradstreet, a couple of videos on Anne Bradstreet. And look, my goal with not only those videos, but everything we do, but I'll say this specifically about Anne Bradstreet. My goal there is for you to be inspired to go and buy a volume of her poetry. We're just looking at a little sampling. It's like, when you go to the mall, when you go to the mall and you walk by in the food court, they get me every time. The people at Panda Express, they're walking around out there with those little samples of that General Chow's chicken on the toothpicks. I mean, one bite of that stuff and I'm there. It's like a little sampling of it, and it's really good. That's what we're doing here. I give you a little sampling of Anne Bradstreet. Now go get the full meal. Go get a volume, have that volume of poetry on your shelf, because now you can speak about it. You can articulate. You can think intelligently about it. We've spent some quality time with her and with poetry, so it's a good thing to have on your shelf. Okay, let's move on. Let's pick up where we left off. I think I mentioned to you the 2 poets we're covering in this poetry unit specifically are Anne Bradstreet and John Milton. John Milton. So we're going to be shifting over to John Milton in this video and the next video. So Milton, and then we'll get back to our next book. Okay, remember, same keys for poetry, historical biographical approach. Same thing, guys. We're going to be looking at John Milton's life, looking at his time period and his audience, and then we're going to be looking at some samplings of his poetry. Same goes for him. I hope after this is over that you'll go buy Paradise Lost, or you probably have a copy of that on your shelf somewhere, and another volume maybe of his poetry, and enjoy John Milton. So let's get right to it. All right, now check out the dates. No, look at that. He is, do the math. How much older is John Milton than Anne Bradstreet? Did you catch the math there? Bradstreet was born in 1612. Yeah, 4 years. So they're growing up. John Milton is only 4 years older than Anne Bradstreet. Remember, Anne Bradstreet, though, went to America in 1630 when she was 18 years old. Her family moved to America. They went to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Different life, different world. Milton stays in England. And remember, Milton would be then living through, look, I spent quality time on this for a reason, the 1630s, 40s English Civil War. Parliament versus the king, all of that. So that's the world Milton's growing up in. Highly educated guy, same as Anne Bradstreet. Studied multiple languages, extremely literate, and so that comes out. That comes out in his poetry. That he has a very broad range and a broad knowledge of history and literature, languages. Once again, he was a Puritan like Anne Bradstreet. So we'll be looking at a male example and female example. Puritans in the 17th century. Ooh, look at that. Somebody was taking some sides. Do you remember which side Cromwell was on in the English Civil War? You remember? Yeah, Parliament. He was, and in fact, remember in 1649, they arrested King Charles I and eventually beheaded him. And Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell sort of rules England for about a decade. And then Charles II comes back to the throne. Remember, Return of the King. We talked about all that. But Milton would have been a roundhead. Remember, we talked about how the mascots weren't really all that cool. But supporter of Parliament, Puritan, and you know what that means? When we read Gulliver's Travels, low heels, low church, yeah, Puritan, Protestant. Okay, just getting it all together here. And of course, you know this. Paradise Lost is recognized as one of the truly great epics of all time, and maybe the greatest epic in the English language. Paradise Lost. So Paradise Lost is, remember, epic, EPIC. We'll get into that later. So we can't read the whole thing here. That's not the whole point. I want to give you a sampling of it. I want to encourage you to read Paradise Lost, but our goal in this course is not to read Paradise Lost in its entirety. Let's take a look at what we are going to do. We're going to do a brief overview of Paradise Lost, and then I have one passage, really cool passage picked out that we're going to go through right there, book 4, lines 639 to 658. And then we're going to read 2 other John Milton poems. One is called On His Blindness. The other one, On His Deceased Wife. And yeah, this is not complicated, friends. Those poems are about exactly those things. His blindness and one of his wives who was deceased. So let's get right to it. Let's talk epic. So first of all, Paradise Lost is an epic. It's a long poem, several hundred pages long. You remember EPIC? Extremely long poem, P, about an incredible hero. Now, that's going to be kind of an interesting one to discuss. Who's the hero of Paradise Lost? God? Yeah, we'll talk about that later. That highlights a particular culture. That's the C. Okay, what culture is being highlighted? Yeah, well, it's a Christian epic. Now, we've talked a lot about these ancient Greek epics, Iliad and Odyssey, and we've talked about Virgil's Aeneid, the great Roman, the great Latin epic. And we understand that they are praising the glories of their culture. It's a very, very man-centered, humanistic worldview. But what about a Christian epic? What exactly is being praised in a Christian epic? Yeah, I've got some things to show you about that. Let's kind of compare the two. The epics of Homer and Virgil versus Paradise Lost. Some of the comparisons and contrasts here are pretty fascinating. So let's move Mr. Edder's bobblehead. What exactly is Milton doing? Well, the Greek epics, the Greek and Roman epics of the ancient world were grand and glorifying the heroic deeds of Achilles and Odysseus and Agamemnon and Aeneas and so forth. John Milton's epic. Where is man in John Milton's epic? Falling, sinning, disobeying God. Ooh, you see what he's doing here? You see the contrast? Not so glorious, is it? Yeah, we messed up and plummeted the entire human race into sin. You have heroes like Achilles and Odysseus and Aeneas, and again, who's the hero of Paradise Lost? Some people look at it and say, seems like Satan. And can an epic maybe not have a hero? Or can it have an anti-hero? Is Adam like an anti-hero? Those are neat things to think about. What is being glorified in the ancient Greek and Roman epics? A new Greece, a new Rome, build back better. We won't get into politics right now. But in John Milton's epic, we have pandemonium. You know the word pandemonium literally means all demons or demonic. That's what pandemonium actually means. So we see this, the power of Satan and the power of his minions, and we have pandemonium. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Of course, in the ancient epics, there's a journey. You know, Odysseus is going on a journey. Aeneas is going to found a new Rome. He goes on a journey, leaves Troy burning to the ground, travels over the Mediterranean, ends up in central Italy, and his descendants become the founders of Rome. There's a journey in John Milton's epic. It's Satan's journey as he travels through space to Earth and to wreak havoc. So my point here is that Milton's doing this on purpose. Milton is mirroring the ancient epics in ways to make a statement about how the Christian worldview is different and distinct. Think about that. What is his stated purpose in Paradise Lost? Once again, where do I stick my head? Well, he says right on the opening page, if you happen to have a copy of Paradise Lost handy, you can grab it. But he says right at the beginning, lines 25 and 26, that his purpose is, quote, to assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. What does that mean? What does he mean to justify the ways of God to men? Have you ever heard of the term theodicy? No, not the Odyssey. Theodicy. I've got the word up on the board there for you. Theodicy is the idea of discussing and explaining or wrestling with how can there be a good God if there's evil and suffering in the world? How can those two go together? How can we believe that that God is there and he's good, and yet horrible, terrible things happen that he apparently does not stop from happening? That's theodicy. That is what Milton says he's doing in Paradise Lost. So he's explaining creation and the fall of man, as an explanation of how there can be a good God, but still exist evil and suffering in the world. Milton is saying that it's all wrapped up in the idea that God made us perfect, wonderful, glorious beings, but he gave us freedom of choice, and we blew it. We blew it. God didn't blow it. We blew it. Whatever evil and suffering we endure, it's on us, not God. All right, let's get to the portion of poetry that I wanted to examine in this video. It's a portion of Paradise Lost. Now, I'm getting this from book 4, line 639 to 658. If you have a copy there at home, feel free to grab it. Otherwise, I've got the full text up here. Now, let me give you a little context, and then I have a question for you that I want you to try to figure out by the time we get to the bottom of it. The context is Eve. Eve is speaking here. Okay, this whole section here, sort of like a little speech, little comment from Eve. Now remember, she didn't have girl night on Thursday evenings to go hang out with her friends. There weren't any friends. There weren't any friends yet. So she's talking to Adam. Now the question I want you guys to consider here is this before or after the fall? Do you think that she should be saying these things before or after sin entered into the world? Let me read it. And then we're going to get into things like literary devices, the rhyme scheme, and if there's a meter that Milton is observing here. So let's read it. With thee conversing, remember this is, old English here, guys. So thee just means you. With thee conversing, I forget all time. Oh, that's sweet, isn't it? In other words, when I'm talking with you, I don't even think about how much time is passing. It's so delightful. All seasons and their change, all please alike. Sweet is the breath of morn, her rising sweet with charm of earliest birds. Pleasant the sun. She's going to go through several areas of nature here and talk about how pleasant they are. But it's all going somewhere. Just hang on. When first on this delightful land he spreads his orient beams on herb, tree, fruit, and flower, Glistering with dew, fragrant the fertile earth, after soft showers and sweet the coming on of grateful evening, mild then silent night. With this her solemn bird and this fair moon, and these the gems of heaven, her starry train, but neither breath of morn when she ascends, with charm of earliest birds, nor rising sun on this delightful land, nor herb, fruit, flower. Notice the repetition here. Notice how she's turning the thought. Hold on. Glistering with dew, nor fragrance after showers, nor grateful evening mild. In other words, all those things are beautiful and adorable, but nor silent night, with this her solemn bird, nor walk by moon or glittering starlight. And the last four words says it all. Without thee is sweet. Those are all wonderful things. Oh, the early morning, the breath, the sweetness of the rising of the sun, the singing of the birds and fruits and flowers and the glistening dew on the grass and the fertile earth. And it's all so very beautiful as long as I can share it with you. Because look at all the nors starting near the bottom here, last 5, 6, 7 lines. Nor. In other words, nor walk by moon or glittering starlight without thee is sweet. Those things are only sweet when I can observe them and share them in your presence, Adam. Wow. Oh, yeah. That is some serious love poetry there, isn't it? Now, let's look at a few things. Before we get to the big question I ask you, what about meter, rhyme? Now let's see. Let's look at rhyme. Time, alike, sweet, sun. Yeah, I don't see a rhyme scheme here, do you? There are some words that rhyme here and there, and there's also some really interesting alliteration here and there. Alliteration is just a repetition of, say, the same vowels or consonants, like a bunch of B's in a row or L's in a row or and you hear, and it kind of, gives a cadence, but no rhyme scheme, is it? There's no A, B, B, C, C. All right, well, let's check about meter. With thee conversing, I forget all time. Oh, we got a 10-syllable line. All seasons and their change all please alike. Yes, we have an iambic pentameter on our hands, friends. So we have an iambic pentameter in terms of meter, but not really a specific rhyme scheme. Okay, I like it. It's beautiful. It's very powerful, very powerful. If I thought I could get by with it, I would recite this to my wife and tell her all the beautiful things of nature are wonderful and great, but they're not sweet without thee. Back to my first question. What do you think? Before or after the fall? Now, remember, this is John Milton's story. This is not in the Bible. This is not in Scripture. So my question is, in Milton's poem, if you guessed before the fall, you guessed right. Now, I'm not saying that someone couldn't write a love poem like this after the fall. But things got pretty nasty after the fall, didn't they? Everybody's pointing finger. Adam's blaming Eve, and Eve is blaming Satan, is blaming the serpent. And I mean, everything falls apart. So I think part of what Milton's communicating here is love, relationships, man, woman, husband, wife had this purity, this pristine perfection, this exquisite beauty before the fall. And when we chose when Adam, and we all chose in Adam to go the selfish route of disobedience against the true and living God, that pristine, that purity, that beauty, that perfect love between man and woman was no more. Now it will be restored. I believe that perfect love and perfect unity will be restored in the end when we're in heaven. But on this side of eternity, we have beautiful relationships, but we have broken relationships. Anyway, I thought you guys would like this poem. The next one we're going to look at in the final video is actually two. We're going to look at two poems. One is called On His Blindness. So be sure that you read that one. Go ahead and start thinking it through. Think meter, think rhyme scheme. And then we're going to read On His Deceased Wife. So you can see both of these about the length of a sonnet. And that's one question I want you to consider. Are these actually just sonnets? Once again, meter, rhyme scheme, historical biographical approach. Looking forward to seeing you in the 5th and final video on this first poetry unit. See you then, guys.